The New Orleans Saints kicked off practice early this week with some big injury news, with center Erik McCoy absent, but wide receiver Chris Olave present. What it all means, we got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as the Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net and Saints analyst with WWL TV. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, we're going to take a look at how important the run game is when it comes to this New Orleans Saints matchup with the Los Angeles Rams, and why the New Orleans Saints could potentially have the edge. We'll also dive into some players that could be coming back from injured reserve sooner rather than later. And we're going to kick it all off with some big injury updates on center Erik McCoy, and even a little bit of movement when it comes to wide receiver Chris Olave as well to kick off today's show. We appreciate you very much for being an everydayer and for making us your first listen of the day over here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by friends over at FanDuel, where you can make every moment more. New customers can place a $5 bet, and we'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. Just head over to FanDuel.com to get started today. So the New Orleans Saints welcomed back one big name player-ish, but we're still missing another big name player on Tuesday. And I'm going to tell you why neither of those moves should either excite you nor concern you in either direction. So let's start off with the player that wasn't present, center Erik McCoy. He was not present for Tuesday's practice. Remember, the New Orleans Saints moved their Wednesday practice up to Tuesday. They're going to move their Thursday practice up to Wednesday, give the players off on Thursday for Thanksgiving, and then get back to it on Friday, getting themselves ready for the Sunday matchup as they come back from the bye week to host the Los Angeles Rams. And even though Erik McCoy wasn't present on Tuesday, it doesn't necessarily mean that you should be concerned about his status on Sunday just yet. Certainly that can change, but it does sound like, according to head coach Darren Rizzi, who we spoke to after practice on Tuesday, that when they came in rather early this week, they decided that they were going to play things a little bit cautious around Erik McCoy, and that they would have more information on him today, Wednesday, when the team gets back to practice and actually has an injury report to report. Even though the Saints moved their practice day up, it doesn't mean that the NFL requires them to release an injury report. So what they'll do is release an injury report on Wednesday based upon their practice. Then they'll release an estimated injury report on Thursday in terms of what it would have been like had they had practice on Thursday. And then they'll have a final injury report with game designation on Friday. So even though they moved their practice schedule around, it doesn't really impact the injury report release schedule. So with them sort of taking things easy and being cautious around Erik McCoy, who I'll tell you I saw in other spots, not necessarily on the practice field, looks okay. So we'll see if he's able to kind of get back and be around. He was in the locker room and all those other things. So we'll see what things look like for him tomorrow and what things look like for him, or rather today, and what things look like for him on Friday when they get back to practice after they're taking a day off tomorrow. So we've already been told that this is not expected to be a long-term issue for Erik McCoy, who injured the groin early on in week 3, ended up having surgery to help with that, came back and then re-injured with another groin injury. I don't know if it was a re-injury, the same injury, or if it was just another injury in the same region. But that happened during the Browns game, and then he ended up missing the kind of latter half of that matchup, latter half plus of that matchup. And so we'll see. Just because it's not long-term doesn't mean that he won't miss games in the short term. But as of right now, sounds like they're just playing things cautious. We'll see. There's a chance he could still go up against the Rams. We'll get a better indication later on today with the injury report. As for Chris Olave, who was present at practice, observing off to the side, he is still on injured reserve. And again, even though he was around the team and he was at the facility and he was in the practice facility and stuff like that, off on the sideline, not participating, I still wouldn't expect to see him back this year. Chris Olave is going through what is going to be a very sensitive and what is going to be a very, how should I say this, nuanced process of working his way back to the football field after numerous concussions this season, multiple concussions this season, numerous concussions now over the course of his young NFL career. He wants to protect his future as not just a football player, but as a human being. And so he is going through the appropriate steps to be able to do that. There were some reports that he's working on strengthening neck muscles, things like that, which really help to kind of absorb a little bit of that impact when going down, hitting the ground, getting hit, all those other things. That is going to make a big difference for him. Is he going to come back here in 2024? I personally, if I were him and I were making the decision, let me say it that way, because I'm not gonna say what I think another person's decision should be. That's not my choice, right? I wouldn't come back here in 2024. There's no reason to, as far as I'm concerned. My health would be paramount to the potential for an unlikely, playoff appearance. And I think the New Orleans Saints are looking at it very similarly. They're not interested in rushing Chris Olave back. In fact, they found ways to survive and produce, particularly at wide receiver, thanks to Marquez Valdes-Scantling, even without their top two guys out on the field. And not only Chris Olave, but also Rashid Shaheed. So I'm letting them do their thing. I'm doing my thing, and I'm setting myself up to be able to be around for my family for the long term. So that's what I would do in that situation. I can't say what I think Chris Olave should do. I can only speak for myself. But I would be surprised if he was back. And I don't think if he made it back to the playing field, I mean. And so I don't think that Olave's presence on Tuesday is indicative that he is trying to play again here in 2024. I'm sure if he gets the all clear, he would want to potentially, but I don't think that needs to be top priority for him. Darren Rizzi updated a bit in his post-practice presser on Tuesday, saying that he's still undergoing sort of the process of visiting with concussion specialists and other specialists to kind of figure out where things are going to go. But he himself, in terms of quality of life, his health, all those other things, he's feeling good. And that's a good thing. That's the most important thing, is how is Chris Olave doing as a human being off of the field, right? A little bit of human factor in all this, a lot of a human factor in this. That's way, way, way paramount in comparison to trying to rush to get back out on the football field this season. Just doesn't feel necessary. So I would not get too excited if you're hoping for Chris Olave to return about the fact that he was on the sideline observing and observing others, not participating himself on Tuesday. I wouldn't be too worried about that just yet. Coming up next, though, there are a couple of players, two in particular, who are starting to work their way back from injured reserve and are expected to be back sooner rather than later. Let's get to both of those players here as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends over at PrizePicks, the easiest and most fun way to play daily fantasy sports with over millions of users and billions of award cash already rewarded to users. You could be next. All you got to do is pick 2 to 6 players, choose whether or not you're going to come in at more or less than their PrizePicks projection, and bam, you're winning real cash. To me, it's you versus the house. It's so much better, in my opinion, than the mystery lineups and all that other stuff that you have to go up against in other daily fantasy formats. It's why I love PrizePicks. And right now, with the Thanksgiving free square, things get even easier because Tyreek Hill only needs to receive a half of a receiving yard for his projection to hit. So if you're correct on at least one other stat projection, you can win real cash this week. All you got to do is download the PrizePicks app and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. Download the PrizePicks app, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by Skylight Frame. If you're like me and you're looking to level up from bad gift giver to everyone's favorite gift giver, Skylight Frame is the way to go. They've got the perfect gift for you. It's a touchscreen digital photo frame that your whole family will love. You can upload thousands of photos from your phone and watch them appear in seconds. It's awesome. I absolutely love it. I use it all the time to kind of show my family what I'm up to because I live in a different state. I'm separated from like my core family. So I got them a Skylight Frame. It takes like 60 seconds to set up. It's super easy to use. You download the app and then bam, it's seamless sharing. You can even invite other family members and friends to be able to contribute as well. And now, as a special limited time offer for our listeners, you can get $20 off of your purchase of a Skylight Frame when you go to skylightframe.com, just locked on NFL. That's SKYLIGHTFRAME.com/NFL. Get $20 off of your purchase now at skylightframe.com/NFL. All right, family. The New Orleans Saints could see some pretty important players coming off of injured reserve here soon to contribute to their late season stretch run. Let's start off with one player that we've discussed a lot over the course of this season, and that is running back Kendre Miller, last year's third-round pick out of TCU. The running back that everybody was kind of hoping was going to really have a big resurgence here or a rival, really, in the second season. And now it kind of feels like his second season kind of got wasted with some injury situations that kept him off the field early on in the year. We can acknowledge both sides of this, right? The hamstring injury just took way, way, way longer than anyone expected. First day of training camp, missed all of training camp, plus the first, 6 games of the season. Finally came back, irritated the hamstring up against the Chargers. From what I'm told, could have gone back in that game, and then now kind of got placed on injured reserve in order to be able to move some other things around on the roster, causing a lot of confusion, frustration within the facility, as far as I'm told. After this game, after the Los Angeles Rams game, Kendre Miller is going to be eligible to return. And our understanding, as of right now, and for the past few weeks, is that once he's ready to go up against the Giants, that he'll be active and ready to go. The phrase that was told to me was all gas, no brakes. We'll see if that holds, but that's a big situation for the New Orleans Saints. I think a lot of people are still kind of down on Kendre Miller because of the injury stuff, but this last kind of IR stint seems to be kind of out of his control for sure. And from what I'm told, he could have gone back into the game against the Los Angeles Chargers, but they decided to play it kind of safe, give him that Panthers game off. And then the plan was to have him ready to go, what would have been now at the first part of the 2-game win streak up against the Atlanta Falcons. But obviously that couldn't happen when he got placed in injured reserve. And it's kind of tricky because the way that injured reserve works, you have to miss 4 games, not 4 weeks, but 4 games in particular. So even with the bye week this past week, that didn't count. So he still has to miss this game up against the Rams before he's able to be kind of brought up again up against the New York Giants next week. So that's going to be a big game for him and an opportunity for him to be able to get back out on the field and kind of prove to people. He's very interested in proving to the fans that, like, look, I can do this. I'm healthy. I can do it. So he might get that opportunity next week. It sounds like that's the plan. We'll see if that ends up panning out, but that could be big for him and certainly would be big for the New Orleans Saints as well, because the run game needs to travel when they hit some of these cold weather games out of state. I mean, New Jersey in December, cold. Green Bay in December, cold. I mean, those are going to be games where they're going to need to be able to run the ball. And so a guy like Kendre Miller, along with Taysom Hill, along with Jamal Williams, along with Alvin Kamara, along with Jordan Mims, like those guys are going to be leaned on in some configuration of that group with Kendre Miller involved late in the season. And they could be big time elements of winning those upcoming games. We'll certainly see the run game be a big part of this week's game up against the Rams, but unfortunately, Kendre Miller won't be available just yet for that. Another player that the Saints are hoping to get back here soon, whose 21-day practice window is now officially open, is defensive lineman Tanoh Kpassagnon. And look, that's huge for New Orleans. A defensive line that has seen the majority of its pressures. Right now, Next Gen Stats has the Saints with only 133 pressures, and 80 plus of them coming from just 2 players. That's Chase Young and Carl Granderson. And so the Saints need another big pass rusher that can come in and help. And I will tell you, regardless of the amount of time that Tanoh Kpassagnon has missed since suffering that Achilles injury during, I believe it was OTAs early on in the season. It was during the offseason before the Saints even got to training camp. Even though he hasn't been able to practice, the dude is definitely not out of shape. He's ready to go. Taryn Rizzi saying that for an injured player, he has seen Tanoh Kpassagnon at the facility more than anybody else. And I can vouch for that. I'm not around the facility as much as Taryn Rizzi and Tanoh Kpassagnon are, of course. But I can't think of a time where I haven't seen Tanoh. I mean, going back to California, he traveled with the team. He was out there. He wasn't even close to getting out on the field at that point, but you saw him all the time working before practice, working after practice, pacing around and getting in some work where he could during practice, not practicing because he could do that, but, working with trainers off to the side, stretching, running, doing some of those things. Like, just huge in terms of what in terms of the commitment that Kpassagnon put in to get back out on the field. And now he's not slick. He ain't slick. He's really not trying to get back before Tommy DeVito and the New York Giants next week, trying to get back to his 3-sack game, career high up against Tommy Cutlets last year. I know what he's doing, and I respect you, Tanoh, for playing the game and trying to get back out there to take on Cutlets again. I see you. But look, I mean, it's great. It's really, really good news for New Orleans. How they shuffle their roster to make that spot for him is going to be very interesting, especially also probably having to shuffle to make the spot for Kendre Miller as well, either in the same week. Because I assume I don't assume that Tanoh is going to be ready to be activated and play this week. So if he's not going to be ready to play this week, then I'd probably keep him in that 21-day practice window, not add him to the active roster yet, because you have the several weeks to do that. And then maybe look, if he's ready to go against Tommy Cutlets, then great over in New York. I think that's good for him. He's the reason why everybody started doing Tommy's Italian hand celebration. You even saw Baker Mayfield do it last week, going up against him after he ran in for a touchdown. Everybody's biting. But however it is that they get him back on the roster, I think they need to get him back on the roster because I think he can be big for them. Late last season, you saw that pass rush front of him and Cam and Brian Brzee, as well as Zach Bond at the time, really kind of be one of their better pass rush packages in terms of down linemen. And now that the Saints are kind of playing this mold, and we've covered this a bunch of times on the show, but now that they're playing this mold to where they're rotating, but they're doing, 5 plays, 6 plays, and then exchanging 1 or 2 players, and then 5 plays, 6 plays, exchanging 1 or 2 players, gives them an opportunity to really get a rhythm all of a sudden together as a unit and also be on the field a little bit more before being subbed out. Those things have value when it comes to that. And I think that Tanoh would be somebody that would benefit from that, being on the field more, getting into a better rhythm, being able to play both inside and outside, having that versatility. That's something that the New Orleans Saints could absolutely use and something that Kpassagnon would be able to provide. So I think that getting him back soon is huge for the New Orleans Saints. And I'd love to see how he gets involved. I'm just very interested to see how the roster tinkering is going to go to be able to make those spaces for he as well as for Kendre Miller as well. So big couple of names to keep an eye out on over the course of the next couple of weeks. Coming up next, the New Orleans Saints going to be taking on the Los Angeles Rams this weekend. Alvin Kamara, Taysom Hill. Can they replicate just smidge, some portion of the success that Saquon Barkley and the Philadelphia Eagles found on the ground? I think so, and I'll tell you why. Coming up next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by friends at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, where you can continue to tackle all the NFL action as the season begins to dwindle down. I'm so upset that the NFL season is moving so quickly. But with America's #1 sportsbook, you can make every moment more that is left. Right now, new customers put down $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The New Orleans Saints right now, 3-point underdogs at home, going up against a Rams team that has been genuinely up and down throughout the season. So maybe you like the New Orleans Saints to pull off the upset. Maybe you like the Saints to cover. Maybe you like the Rams to win and cover. You can dive into all that over on the FanDuel Sportsbook app, where you can get everything that you need, including live bets, live stats, and play-by-play, all in the same place where you place your bets as well. So go check them out today at FanDuel.com to join. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins as a new customer. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. The New Orleans Saints might not have one player to go for over 300 all-purpose, or rather yards from scrimmage, like the Philadelphia Eagles had on Sunday night up against the Los Angeles Rams with Saquon Barkley. But they do have 2 players, Alvin Kamara and Taysom Hill, who do have a unique opportunity here to take advantage of where Los Angeles has been not just weak on Sunday Night Football, but has been consistently weak over the course of this season, and that is going to be in the run game. And the New Orleans Saints run game might, again, just like it was against Cleveland, be the element that allows them to maybe come away with a home upset here up against the Los Angeles Rams. Let me give you some statistics, some numbers, some things some facts to impress your friends that kind of help to bring this to light. Because I want to be very clear. It's not just about like, oh, well, Saquon Barkley did it, so the Saints can do it too, because that's not the same thing, right? The Saints don't have Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley is playing out of his mind this season. And honestly, good for him, by the way. If I could put my NFL cap on for a second, good for him. So we'll dive into that, or not dive into that, but so we'll leave that aside, rather. I want to dive into where the Rams have been genuinely weak all season, and that is in defending the run, but specifically where the New Orleans Saints excel in their run game. So the Los Angeles Rams right now, not a great run defense, right? We all can kind of be aware of that. We can see that at home. They've allowed over 130 rushing yards per game, but on the road, they've allowed 151.4 rushing yards per game. So they have been abysmal against the run all season long away from SoFi. That's big. They're traveling here to the Superdome. Darren Rizzi has said over and over again that he wants the Superdome to get back to where it once was. Here's an opportunity to be able to take advantage of exactly that. The Los Angeles Rams have not been the best team defending the run away from home. Here's a chance for the New Orleans Saints to make them pay with talented rushers like Alvin Kamara, as well as Taysom Hill. Let's go a step further and get a little bit deeper into these numbers as well. When it comes to where things stand for the Rams across the NFL, looking at teams that allow a lot of rushing yards outside the tackles in particular, the Los Angeles Rams are the third worst team in that category, allowing 88 yards per game outside the tackles on the ground. And that is third worst in the NFL. And listen to the other two teams that have been, that are a part of that. The Dallas Cowboys, sound familiar, and the Carolina Panthers, sound familiar. Each of those teams have allowed over 100 rushing yards per game outside the tackles. The Rams are number 3 at 88 yards. Why do I highlight the Dallas Cowboys and the Carolina Panthers? Well, the New Orleans Saints ran for 180 rushing yards against the Carolina Panthers in week 1. They ran for 190 rushing yards against the Dallas Cowboys in week 2. And then again against the Carolina Panthers in week 9, they ran for 197 rushing yards. So there's a trend here. When teams struggle to defend the outside run, the New Orleans Saints have done a good job of taking advantage of that. Right now, the Dallas Cowboys are allowing 5.3 yards per play when defending the outside run. The Los Angeles Rams, 5.3 yards per play when defending the outside run allowed. So that has worked very well against Los Angeles. And we can see opponents where this has worked for the New Orleans Saints. I'll tell you another team that's within the top 5 of that ranking, the Cleveland Browns, who allow 79.3 yards per game outside the tackles. A team that the Saints just ran for over 200 yards against, including, of course, 138 yards, if I recall correctly, by Taysom Hill himself. So we're not just looking at this and saying, oh, well, Saquon Barkley did it, so too can the New Orleans Saints, which actually isn't that far from true. I'll tell you why here in just a second. But specifically, this is just simply where the Rams have struggled all season. Travis Rogers from over at Locked On Rams and I will be breaking down this very game in tomorrow's Crossover Thursday. Yes, it's Thanksgiving. I don't care. You're still getting a Locked On Saints episode. So that is something that he and I discuss as being a huge part of this game. And it's a big part of where the Rams have struggled. Their defensive line has actually been pretty good. Pair of rookies, Braden Fisk as well as Jared Verse have been awesome. But they're really awesome when they're running straight ahead. They've been challenged when they're made to move laterally, and that's what the outside tackle run game is going to do. So we did a film breakdown of the opening drive of the New Orleans Saints win over the Cleveland Browns for the Locked On Saints Insiders. You can join that by texting Who Dat to 504-285-7473 or clicking the link in the description so you can get film studies and things like that. In that film study, what we broke down is how often the Saints utilized Taysom Hill and how many times they utilized Taysom Hill, which Darren Rizzi said on yesterday, in his post-practice presser. One of my favorite phrases to say, by the way, post-practice presser. That is a little bit more akin to what it is that they want to do with Taysom. So use him in a bunch of different ways. Did a great job of that, setting up that exact game plan in the first drive over the course of the first 8 or so plays, however many it was. But the Saints also did a really good job of running away from Myles Garrett. And I don't just mean literally running away from Myles Garrett in the run game. They also had Derek Carr running away from Myles Garrett by sending him on the boot actions, things like that, over the opposite side of where Myles Garrett was lined up. They'll do the same thing, or they should do the same thing against Jared Verse, who spends over 67% of his snaps lined up over on the offensive left side, matched up with fellow rookie offensive tackle Taliesin Fuanga, who is awesome in last week's game against the Cleveland Browns and Myles Garrett. So he gets an opportunity to continue that. The Saints get an opportunity to continue to build their run game. You get it. But why would Alvin Kamara specifically be somebody that could replicate the success of a Saquon Barkley? Well, let me explain that. If you look at the list of NFL players with the most yards from scrimmage, the top 3 are as follows. Saquon Barkley with 1,649 rushing yards. Derrick Henry, who's played 12 games, by the way. Everybody else on this list has played 11, but has played 12 games. 1,421 yards from scrimmage. And number 3, Alvin Kamara, 1,225 yards from scrimmage. He is only 7 yards shy of Derrick Henry on a per-game basis with 1 fewer game played when it comes to yards from scrimmage. So Alvin Kamara, with a 12th game, could viably be the number 2 player on this list. We don't know. So when it comes down to this game, and by the way, this list is really interesting. I mean, you look at the top 20, 17 of those 20 players are all running backs. Several of these players, Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara, Josh Jacobs at 6, Aaron Jones at 7, Breece Hall at 9, Joe Mixon at 10, are also, interestingly, all running backs who have either A, had the narrative around them that they're going to fall off a cliff and that the injuries were going to limit their ability to be successful. Alvin Kamara, with age, was also a common factor in that as well. Breece Hall and his injuries, stuff like that. Or B, they're all players that have been cast off by one team and picked up by another team. Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, Aaron Jones, Joe Mixon. So pretty interesting there. And so it should make you feel pretty good about Alvin Kamara's little 2-year extension all of a sudden, right? So not only can the Saints take advantage of what is a natural weakness so far of the Los Angeles Rams, but being able to do so with Alvin Kamara is actually in the cards because he's not far off of the production of the other top running backs in the NFL. In fact, he is a top running back in the NFL and on course for his first ever 1,000-yard rushing season. Should be able to stay on course here against Los Angeles Rams. And oh, by the way, Taysom Hill is really, really good and is Taysom Hill. So those are going to be the 2 guys that are going to end up having a big-time impact and will be a big-time key up against Los Angeles Rams in the run game. For more on this game, come back tomorrow. Myself and Travis Rogers breaking it all down, having a lot of fun. Travis and I are always like the fun, nearing a breakdown guys, and so we have a good time. Make sure you come through for that. We appreciate you very much, as always. Making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you go and check out Locked On NFL. And of course, we thank you very much for making us a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. I'm not a family doing them. How you living? Let me know how you momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation. I'll holla at you.